morning light filtered softly through the curtains, painting the room in a calm, golden hue. James sat quietly by the window, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Outside, the world looked peaceful, but inside him, the echoes of the past still whispered like a restless wind. He had fallen many times, stumbled through failure, betrayal, and regret. Yet the deepest wound of all had never been in business. It had been in love. Diep stood in the garden, her hands gently brushing the petals of white lilies James had planted for her months ago. She smiled faintly, though her heart still carried the bruises of yesterday. They had loved each other fiercely, but love, as she had learned, was not always gentle. Sometimes it came with storms, misunderstandings, distance, and words that hurt more than silence. James watched her from afar, his heart tightening. He had promised himself that he would never hurt her again, but promises were fragile things when weighed against human weakness. There had been nights he could not sleep, haunted by the memory of her tears, those tears that once fell because of his pride, his fear, his silence. Life had taught them both that love is not built in the sunshine, but in the rain, in the days when everything seems broken, yet two people still choose to stay. Diep had every reason to walk away, but she stayed, and that to James was the purest kind of forgiveness. That morning, as he stood and walked toward her, he didn't say a word. He simply wrapped his arms around her from behind. Diep froze for a moment, surprised, then slowly turned to meet his eyes. There was no need for apologies, not anymore. The way he held her, trembling slightly, said everything. In that quiet moment, between the whispers of the breeze and the warmth of their touch, they both realized something profound. Love doesn't erase the wounds, it transforms them. Every scar was a lesson, every tear a seed for something gentler, deeper and stronger. And as Diep leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, she knew that despite everything, this was home. Not a place, not perfection, but a person who had learned to love her better each day. Days turned into weeks, and though peace seemed to return, James and Diep both knew that healing was not a straight road. It was full of quiet pauses, soft relapses, and small acts of courage. James had started going back to work after months of rest. His company was recovering, slowly but steadily. But every time he sat in his office, surrounded by numbers, reports, and decisions, his mind wandered back to Diep, to the woman who had stayed even when the world turned its back on him. He wanted to give her more than words. He wanted to prove that love could rebuild everything, not with grand gestures, but through consistency and truth. At home, Diep found herself painting again. Her brush moved gently over the canvas, creating images of dawn skies and wildflowers. Painting had once been her escape. Now it was her way of remembering joy. James would come home late, often tired, but he would always pause by her easel, watching quietly. "It's beautiful," he would whisper. She would smile without looking up, replying softly, "It's for us." But even in their gentle days, there were shadows that lingered. One night, as the rain tapped gently on the windows, Diep confessed in a trembling voice, "Sometimes I'm still scared that one day you'll choose your work over us again." Her words hung in the air, fragile, honest. James turned toward her, his eyes filled with regret. "I used to think success meant having everything, but I was wrong. Without you, Diep, I have nothing." His voice cracked slightly as he continued. "Every mistake I made, every time I let pride win, it was all because I didn't understand what real love meant. Now I do." He took her hand and placed it over his heart. "You see this? It beats because you stayed, because you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Diep's tears fell silently, but this time they were not from pain. They were from the warmth of being understood. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Then let's promise," she whispered. "No matter how hard life gets, we won't let silence win. We'll talk, we'll fight if we have to, but we'll never walk away." James nodded. That's a promise I'll keep for a lifetime. Outside, the rain eased, leaving the world washed clean under the pale light of the moon. Inside, two hearts beat as one, no longer afraid of scars because now they knew that even wounds could bloom into something beautiful when cared for with love. Just when James and Diep thought peace had finally taken root, life tested them once more, not with storms of anger, but with the quiet ache of the past returning. One morning, as sunlight filtered softly through the kitchen window, Diep received a letter. It was written in neat, familiar handwriting, the kind that carried both warmth and pain. The sender's name made her breath catch. John, the man who had once brought so much turmoil into their lives. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The words were simple, almost humble. Diep, I'm leaving the country soon. Before I go, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I destroyed lives because I was lost in revenge. But your kindness changed something in me. I hope one day you and James will forgive me. John. Diep sat still for a long moment. The memories of deceit, fear, and heartbreak returned, but they felt distant now, like echoes of another lifetime. She knew this was a test, not of anger, but of forgiveness. That evening, she showed the letter to James. His expression was unreadable at first. Then he sighed deeply, placing the paper down. I thought I'd buried all that pain, he said quietly. But maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's about finally setting ourselves free. Diep looked at him, her heart swelling with quiet pride. This was the same man who once carried the weight of pride and vengeance, now speaking with softness and wisdom. He's leaving, she said. Should we meet him before he goes? James hesitated, then nodded. Yes, for us. The next day they met John at a small riverside cafe. The years had changed him. His once sharp eyes now carried exhaustion and regret. When he saw them, he stood up immediately, his voice low. James, Diep, thank you for coming. There was silence. The air was thick with unspoken memories. Then James stepped forward and extended his hand. The past can't be changed, he said slowly, but we can choose how it ends. John clasped his hand, his eyes glistening. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, Diep replied gently. But forgiveness isn't something to deserve. It's something to give. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Three broken souls standing at the edge of the river, watching the current carry away years of resentment. When John finally walked away, Diep leaned into James's arm. Do you feel lighter? She asked. James smiled faintly. I feel human again. And as the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the sky in gold, they both knew that this, forgiving, healing, and loving despite the pain, was the truest lesson life could ever teach. Weeks passed since that quiet meeting by the river. Life slowly returned to its peaceful rhythm. The storms that once shattered their hearts had drifted far away, leaving behind clear skies and softer winds. One late afternoon, James was tending the small garden behind their house while Diep sat nearby, watching little Nee chase butterflies. The sound of Nee's laughter floated through the air like music, pure, bright, and full of life. It was the kind of sound that made every scar feel worth it. James wiped his hands and looked at Diep. You know, he said with a quiet smile, I used to think strength meant never falling, never showing pain, but now I see that strength is choosing to love again after being broken. Diep smiled back, her eyes glimmering in the golden light. Every wound taught us something. Even the pain had its reason. James nodded. Every wound is a lesson. And you, Diep, you were my gentlest answer. She reached for his hand, holding it firmly. And you were my courage, she whispered. You taught me that even when the world feels heavy, love can be soft and kind. Just then, Nye ran toward them, holding a small wildflower she had picked from the grass. For you, Mommy. For you, Daddy, she said, her little voice bubbling with joy. James knelt and took the flower from her tiny hand, his throat tightening. Diep bent down and kissed Nee's forehead. The three of them stayed like that for a moment, a small family bound not by perfection, but by forgiveness, compassion, and love that had survived every storm. As evening settled, the first stars began to appear. James wrapped his arm around Diep and whispered, "We've been through everything, pain, loss, and darkness, but we're still here." Diep leaned against him, her voice soft. Because love was never about avoiding the pain, it was about walking through it together. And under the quiet glow of the night sky, their hearts finally found peace. Every wound had turned into wisdom, every tear into tenderness. Love had not saved them like a miracle. It had taught them how to heal. In the end, James and Diep didn't need grand gestures or promises. They only needed each other, two hearts that had once been broken, now whole again, proving that love, in its gentlest form, is the most powerful answer of all. Months later, the rhythm of life around James and Diep's home became a song of quiet happiness. The once bustling house that had echoed with tension and fear was now filled with laughter, the smell of fresh tea, and the sound of Nee humming as she drew with her crayons by the window. James often woke early, not to face endless meetings or business wars, but simply to watch the sunrise with Diep. He had learned that true success wasn't in wealth or power, it was in waking up beside someone who made your heart feel at home. One Sunday morning, they decided to visit the countryside where Diep was born. The journey was long, the road uneven, but their hearts were light. When they arrived, the village seemed unchanged. The green fields, the scent of soil, and the quiet river still flowed as it had years ago. Diep stood by the water, her eyes glistening. "I used to dream of escaping this place," she said softly. "Now I realize it was where I learned what love really means. Patience, sacrifice, and faith." James slipped his arm around her shoulders. "And it's where I found you," he said, his voice full of emotion. "The woman who taught me to feel again." They sat together by the riverbank as Nee tossed stones into the water, her laughter echoing across the breeze. The sunlight fell on their faces, warm and forgiving, as if the universe itself was smiling upon them. In that moment, James closed his eyes and whispered, "We've made it, Diep. Through every storm, every loss, we've made it." Diep leaned her head on his shoulder. "Because love never let us go," she replied. As the sky turned to shades of pink and gold, Nee ran back to them, her tiny hands clutching a small heart-shaped stone she had found by the river. "Look, Mommy, Daddy, it's love." James and Diep laughed. Real, unrestrained laughter. The kind that only comes after years of struggle and healing. James lifted Nee into his arms and kissed her cheek. And for the first time in a long, long while, everything felt whole. Their hearts had been broken, their souls tested, but through every wound they had learned, love, no matter how fragile it seems, has the strength to mend everything it touches. In the end, they didn't need perfection. They only needed this: a quiet home, the warmth of family, and the gentle truth that every wound carries a lesson.